Alright guys, we are back again with some Duels of Runeterra gameplay. So this one is going to be Presto versus Winding God in Duels of Runeterra number 10. This is actually round 7 of Swiss to start off day 2, which we had 9 rounds for this time around. As of round 7, Winding God was looking to take home his 4th Duels of Runeterra in a row. That's right, 4. Absolutely insane. And actually, he had already been to the previous 4 finals. He lost the first one, but then won the next 3 in a row. So, can Presto beat Winding God? Well, we'll see in this matchup. I was casting alongside my dude, Boulevard. Awesome time, as always. If you guys are new to the channel, my name is Justin, also known as Shit Just Works. And today, we have some Day 2, Round 7 Duels of Runeterra action. So, without further ado, let's get into the gameplay. Oh, I did it again. Actually, this will be an easy fix this time though. Haha. We will swap the names. Now that we have this new overlay here, I can just move the names in 2 seconds. So, what is up, everybody? We are live for day 2 of Duels of Runeterra 10. I'm here with Boulevard. What's up, man? Having a good day?
Yeah, having a good day so far. Just got done doing the EU rounds not too long ago, so I did a lot of casting yesterday as well, so I'm very familiar with watching the Ash Noxus and the Sea Monster mirrors at this point, which I expect we're going to see a lot more of later on today, as we are going to get started off with Winding God versus Presto, and Winding God once again bringing that Sea Monster, Ash Freljord Noxus, and Heimer Vi sort of traditional lineup that we've seen out of a few players. So Demacia pretty much off the table for a couple of the top players, including Winding God.
Yeah, that Sea Monster matchup, the mirror match you're talking about, it's definitely sometimes not the most exciting matchup either. I will say it's similar, very similar to the days of all the Bannerman mirror matches that we're seeing, which still does happen. I mean, Bannerman's not as prevalent probably as Sea Monsters at this point, but I was talking to Cass yesterday about this when we were doing day 1. I very much was not a believer in Sea Monsters. Like, I didn't really get what the fad was and why everybody was so uppity about it, but I think once the deck started shifting from the slower version, like not playing Thorny Toad and not playing 3 Jettisons and stuff like that, the quick version is so much better. You're deep by turn 6 or 7, and it's so much better to go all out in the toss strategy.
Yeah, I think you and I, when we casted Jam Fest together last week, we had both talked a lot about how we weren't sold on Sea Monsters, and then Please Don't Hack Me came out with this really fast version and, kind of put us on the train of the believers. But I think a lot of it for this weekend especially is that of your big 3 Shadow Isle decks, Karina, Endure, and Sea Monsters was the only one that wasn't touched, and it felt like one of the only sort of top performing tournament decks alongside Ash Noxus that didn't get touched. So it makes a lot of sense for those to come out in sort of this like day 1 tournament meta. I don't think we're necessarily going to settle out in seeing Demacia cut from every lineup for the next 4 weeks, but I definitely think this is probably the best day 1 lineup that you could have brought.
So we are actually going to do a Presto versus Winding God here for round 7. I think we're 9 rounds today, right?
Yep.
So more rounds than usual. I think we usually are at 8 rounds, but I'm going to go ahead and switch over to Presto screen. It looks like they're about to get started here. So let's pull this bad boy up. All right, and it looks like, so I have their deck lists up. It looks like Winding God has been dealing with some Heimer Vi action today, as well as Ash Sejuani, which we were just talking about, and Sea Monsters, which we were just talking about. We have Presto, which is he's also running Ash Sejuani. He's running Ezreal Karma, and also Sea Monsters. So 2 very similar deck lineups right now.
Yeah, the main interesting part is the differences in the deck lists. We've seen a lot of diversity across the Sea Monster lists, but Winding Gods especially sticks out to me. He's not running any copies of Terror of the Tide or Shipwreck Order, curving out at Devourer of the Depths as his top end. And then also not running any of the healing spells out of Shadow Isle, no copies of Grasp of the Undying or Withering Well or Vengeance, instead running 2 Ruination as his top end on the spell lineup.
Yeah, and Cass and I were talking about Ruination a little bit yesterday, and if that was actually a smart decision. From what we were seeing, it actually was not looking to be a good decision overall playing the 2 Ruination. We saw a lot of aggro decks like Lucian, Zed, and stuff like that that were kind of just basically beating down the deck before it even had a chance to play Ruination. So I'm curious to see in these matchups if he can get any value out of these.
Yeah, and Ruination is something that works out really well in the Sea Monster mirror theoretically, but I think Vengeance is just a little bit better. If you can take out the Nautilus, then your opponent has a much harder time setting up the board. You don't have to worry about it as much. But into the game at hand, I'm a little surprised to see Presto not fire off the Static Shock, as I think Jaw Hunters is one of the prime targets for that, and you can get out a lot of early aggression with these Eye of the Dragons.
Yeah, I got to question that a little bit too. Maybe he's trying to get the 2 targets off of it. He's worried about making sure he hits his 8 targets as quickly as possible. Doesn't want to waste that Static Shark target. And we see another Jaw Hunters come down too. So I think at this point he might have to play one of the Static Shocks on the following turn and just hope that, you know, Winding God does play some sort of other follower before he decides to attack next turn. Or just take the block. So now the Static Shock's useless.
Yeah, it looks like Presto just not valuing the Eye of the Dragons at all in this matchup. Says just go ahead and take these to the Jaw Hunters. He's going to be able to push through a little bit of damage with this Chump Wump. As I mentioned, Winding God extremely light on the removal in this Sea Monster deck. And the one thing I've kind of been tracking across all the Sea Monsters that we've seen so far is Winding God not playing Atrocity.
Yeah, that has been a popular addition. And actually, what are your thoughts on the Atrocity in these decks? I do think with playing, you know, a 13-13 champion, I feel like it can sometimes be a pretty good addition. But what have you guys seen so far, especially in the EU side?
So I do like the Atrocity a lot. I think especially because you can play it in the same turn as Nautilus on turn 10, but mostly we saw a couple of Sea Monster mirrors get decided just by one player, you know, having a couple of Drag Dredgers while the opponent stumbled, pushing them down to that 13 life total very easily early on. And then, you know, 12 turns later, the payoff comes with the Nautilus Atrocity. I don't think that I like the 2 or 3 of that a lot of players are stacking up on. I think just having that threat in your deck so your opponent can't fall down to the 13 life total is valuable, but I think 1 is fine.
I have to agree with the 1, and that's kind of my thought process with the Ruination too. I personally think that having 1 in the deck is really all you need for a lot of these matchups. I know Cass was saying that if you are going to play it, to play the 2, but I do think just having threats like that as a 1-of definitely, you know, it affects your opponent's decision making throughout the game. It can sometimes be a pretty big advantage.
Yeah, something that I've personally found success with in the past in paper card games especially is if you know that you're going into an open deck list tournament, you can put 1 of a blowout card into your deck list, and it doesn't matter if you see it or not. Your opponent has to respect it and play around it for the entirety of the series.
Yep.
And actually something that I do want to note that I didn't really think of here. So WindingCon coming out with an interesting ban strategy. We've seen a lot of these similar lineups, a lot of players bringing the Sea Monsters, Frostbite, and then some kind of Ionia P and Z. But WindingCon didn't ban the Ionia PZ, which is what we generally see banned out and just going for the 2 mirror matches. So I'm curious I think Winding God would have banned out the Sea Monsters in that case.
Yeah, I will say that's a very interesting decision. I think pretty much every game we saw, Ezreal was just like, nope, not dealing with that. So it is very surprising to see this in this first game, having the Ezreal be played against these Sea Monsters. And I think one of the reasons, and you can see here too, I just want to go back to the Static Shock. He was able to get 2 targets with that first one. So it does look like Presto is just really focused on getting these targets as quickly as possible, because he knows with this new deep deck, like I was just talking about earlier, with the, you know, just going deep super fast, I think he's just worried if they go deep on turn 6 or 7, it's just going to be game over. He's not going to be able to come back from it fast enough. So he has to be getting his Ezreal leveled around the same turn and be able to combo off around the same turn as well.
Yeah, and that's a big ask for the Ionia deck. We know that Bilgewater Twisted Fate, or Bilgewater Ezreal rather, is probably the fastest Ezreal deck in terms of actually leveling it up. And Presto, with this slew of removal in his hand, doesn't look like he's going to have any problem leveling it, but might have some problems finding the actual Ezreal. And Karma, as we do see, up to 6 mana, just a pretty expensive hand on the side of Presto. And I think that might be why Winding God was okay leaving it up. Just Presto not going to have a lot of opportunities to actually get these units down, and the removal doesn't line up well at all into the Sea Monsters.
Yeah, what I will say is that if he does decide to play a Karma here, I mean, like you were saying, there's no Grasp, there's no Vengeance. He just has a 2 Ruination, and I don't really think Ruination is a great card to be playing for Winding God right now. So there is some thought to, especially after this Abyssal Eye coming down. I think he does make the good decision and play the Shadow Assassin. He wants to be able to block those Abyssal Eyes. But I was going to say there is merit to being able to play the Karma and start generating some additional cards as well.
Yeah, and we do see the Ezreal picked up, and with only two, or with it's sitting at 4 out of 8, and with the two Mystic Shot and the Static Shock, he can turn it on, but he doesn't have a lot of spells to follow up after that. Does have the Deep Meditation for the refuel, the Karma for the combo of the Karma Ezreal, and we'll kind of have to see if Presto can sort of stall this one out to turn 10, as Winding God is going to have a massive attack turn on this turn 9.
Yeah, he is going to have a pretty good attack turn, but what I will say is this does set up very well for Presto, because he will be able to get rid of, or not get rid of the Abyssal Eyes, but at least chump block them, even if they do go up to a 7/7. So that prevents him from dying next turn. It also kills more of his field so that it continues to devalue a potential Ruination, which means he has free reign pretty much to play a Karma next turn into an Ezreal on the following turn. So I fully expect that he's going to try to unload as much targets as he can right now so that the next attack token he gets, he'll be able to play his Ezreal.
Yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about the Mystic Shot onto this, because he only floats 1 mana into this turn, so he could have just floated the 3 mana into this turn and not played the Mystic Shot. And since we do see Winding God 3 away from deep, there's a lot that he could play here to actually get these out of the Static Shock range. But I think you have to go for it anyway, because even if it doesn't work out, you do at least get to turn on your Ezreal.
So I was thinking the same exact thing as you, and then I realized, which I make this mistake all the time playing, his hand was at 10. So he had to play the Mystic Shot. He had to. Dude, listen, you know how many times I figure out that I can't count when I play this game, when I have to figure out how many cards are in my hand, and it feels really bad. So
they brought me here to talk, not to do math.
Yeah. What is it? That's why the eye is in the game. You just hover over it. It tells you what to do.
We do see the Jettison come out of Winding God. That was pretty expected. Going to be able to get these Abyssal Eyes up to the 6/6s, this Devourer up to the 7/7. And yeah, I think that it is a little strange to me, I will say. I think we were talking last week about the potential patch changes, and with all the other Shadow Isle decks getting nerfed out, Sea Monsters was the one that was kind of the most popular in the tournament scene for the weeks coming up to the balance patch, and it didn't get touched at all.
Yeah, it really didn't. But I think Riot kind of wants to pave the way for Sea Monsters to be successful, just with, them being a new archetype with the new set. So they're probably going to give them a little bit longer until they really see if they're going to do as well as needing a nerf or something like that. All right, so with Presto's hand, I mean, do you ever consider playing the Karma there with? All right, he does have 9 mana, so he could have a Devourer, I guess, in hand, and that's really what you're most worried about.
Yeah, the thing that I hate most about the Sea Monster matchup while casting is it is so hard for me to keep track of what has been tossed.
Yeah, especially without him pulling up the scroll on the side there, it is very difficult. Obviously, if he did somehow toss the Devourers, I would say maybe Karma is a viable option there, because then it does really force a Ruination out as the only way to remove anything.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if he's even going to be comfortable playing something like an Ezreal here. Just setting that up for the next turn. As long as if you can get down Karma on one turn and then Ezreal on the next turn, you feel like you're in a great position to win this game, especially with Winding God only being at 12, not having any healing in the deck outside of the Vile Feast. Dreadbloom Wanderer a little bit late to be coming down here and really having an impact on the life total at least. But yeah, Presto, not a lot of proactivity in the hand. Does have the Chump Wump to make some shrooms, does have the Key Guardian, but we're going to have to see how he actually does manage to get this one out. 7 mana. I don't know if Winding God's gonna float this.
No, I was gonna say he's probably gonna play something, and that's a prime jettison to pass priority back over to Presto and still use some more mana. So Presto's got to think a little bit here. I mean, there's thought to play the Chump Wump. Maybe he does have the hand space, or play the Ezreal now, but it does feel bad that he wasn't able to get the Ezreal down that turn.
Yeah, I'm trying. If he sets up this Chump Wump this turn, does he have the capability to just kill Winding God on the following turn without the Karma?
I'm not. He is only at 12, so there is a good possibility, especially with no lifesteal outside of Dreadbloom Wanderer. Yeah, and there's the Devourer, so we kind of figured that was going to come down. He does, actually, that's something I wasn't even thinking of. He does have the Deny in hand the entire time, so I almost feel like he should have played the Karma last turn on the 6 mana. He would have been able to deny anything that came out and probably just went straight into an Ezreal on this turn. So I'm kind of curious as to why he didn't do that last turn. I think either way, he kind of has this locked down.
Yeah, I was actually a little surprised to see the Deny come out instead of something like the Chump Wump, I think you have 5 burst spells in hand that you can play with the Ezreal.
Mhm.
And because Winding God is deep, that means he doesn't have a lot of cards in deck, and the Shrooms are that much more impactful, that
Yep.
much more likely to be drawn. And instead, going to throw it on the Ezreal now that the second Devourer is off the table. There's no removal that Winding God could have here. It doesn't even have Atrocity in the deck. And we see the Maokai level up.
Ooh.
That's going to be pretty big. But luckily for Presto, does already have the Ezreal, does have the Karma
Yeah.
on board.
And that's what's, I mean, the second Winding God saw the Ezreal hit, he's like, man, this feels bad. I have a leveled Maokai. It's not even going to really do me any good here. And I think, listen, I could be wrong, but I think really the entire reason why Presto might have taken this line is because how do you turn down getting a Karma and Ezreal on the field at the same time? Like, regardless of what other plays you have, it's like if you have both of those champions on the field, it just feels like an auto win, right?
Yeah, and I'm trying to make sure that Presto doesn't actually just deck out here trying to win the game, because he does have to play some draw spells in order to actually win the game.
I think the Insight of Ages does it, though. Yeah,
there's counterfeit copies as well.
Yep.
Or that's a jury rig, same thing.
Yeah,
I think he's got the burst capabilities.
And even with these fast spells that he has, I mean, I think he has it. How many? I was just gonna say, if he plays the barrier, I think he still has enough cards in his deck where he can afford to draw. And he just needs.
Because he did just shuffle in the 2 karmas.
Now, question.
Yeah.
If he plays a burst spell, and at simultaneously, like, let's say it's Deep Meditation, and Deep Meditation is the very last spell played at the same time he decks out, what happens first? Do we know?
I don't know if you can actually lose to deck out through Deep Meditation.
So maybe because it's saying draw 2 spells, but if they're not there, obviously you wouldn't draw them.
Yeah.
Because I do know if you play it on only 1 spell left in your deck, it obviously only gets 1 spell. So that might make sense. So all right, so let's say it's Key Guardian, right?
Yeah, sure.
So what happens first?
Theoretically, you should lose the game because Ezreal doesn't fire off his ability until after the spell has resolved. So I would think that you would lose the game.
Okay, I tend to agree with that too. Yeah, I don't think it would resolve. Ezreal wouldn't resolve until after the draw happens. So yeah, I would like to actually see that. I feel like I don't believe things about this game until I see it happen in the game. Like, I feel like there's so many weird interactions. It's crazy.
Yeah, okay, so we actually do see the Frostbite control is what was banned out by Winding God. And I know that we've seen this Sea Monster Frostbite control matchup a lot over the course of the weekend. And I feel like Sea Monster should be favored, but I also feel like more often than not, I am seeing the Frostbite control actually win that matchup just by getting a good Culling Strike down onto the Nautilus, preventing the setup, or just having a massively aggressive opener.
Yeah, and this is the matchup we were just talking about earlier. We've seen it a ton of times. And honestly, they both have a really good start. I mean, 2 Dreg Dredgers is insane. The Jettison and another Dreg Dredger from Presto. We can't see Winding God's hand, but this hand that Presto has, he's smiling too. This hand that Presto has is like probably a dream hand versus pretty much anything, right? Aggro or mirror match. He's going to go deep very quick.
Yeah, and so generally Winding God he'll bring a standard lineup, but he'll put his own twists on the deck. And I do think that this deep deck is like the first time that I don't actually like the adaptations that he's brought out here. He doesn't have access to Thorny Toad. He's running a couple copies of Yi Warned. He doesn't have the Vengeance. I definitely feel like Presto is favored in this mirror match because he does have access to the Atrocity and the Vengeance, as well as Thorny Toad to help accelerate the deep. And a lot of times the deep sea monster mirror is going to be determined by who can get deep faster, especially if it happens significantly faster than your opponent and you have 1 or 2 turns where your sea monsters are just 3/3 bigger than your opponent.
Yeah, he's playing no Shipwrecked Hoarder. That seems so bizarre to me, that there's 0 copies of that in there. And the only thing I will say about not including Thorny Toad, it seems really good against, any sort of burn or aggro deck. But the issue I've seen with Thorny Toad with these mirror matches is that it usually sticks on the field for a while and doesn't die. So now it's actually just taking up space on the field that you need for other bigger sea monsters. We actually saw that happen in one of the rounds yesterday. I forget who it was that we were watching, but 2 Thorny Toads literally stayed there until the very end of the game when somebody won with just big sea monsters.
Yeah, I think that sea monsters and Heimerdinger were probably the 2 biggest winners of the patch 1.0 change, where you were able to just play units over top of other units.
Yep.
So it's not that big of an issue. Obviously, like, you don't get the good value out of it, but I think it's more or less a fine card to have sit around for a while. It'll push in a little bit of damage, and because Presto does have Atrocity, and because Winding God has such a stagnant life total, if this Thorny Toad just gets to keep poking in, Winding God's just going to get closer and closer to that Nautilus Atrocity sweet spot.
Now, why do you think Winding God decided to not go with Shipwreck Order? Because that to me is just such a good card.
So Shipwreck Hoarder, Terror of the Tide, and Lore of the Depths are like the 3 cards that keep getting juggled around in these decks that Sea Monster players can't seem to agree on. Personally, I'm a big fan of Shipwreck Hoarder. I think one of the main considerations is that, especially looking at the King of Runeterra Korean tournament, Pilfer decks are on the rise. Riot pointed them out as a potential problem, watch listed them, and Shipwreck Hoarder, if you get a treasure stolen by a Pilfer deck, that is one of the easiest ways to actually lose the game.
Wow. Yeah, and that is a good point. I did see that in the patch notes, and I will say it definitely feels bad to have all your cards joinked and played against you. We had, I think it was Topher yesterday. Had a really bad. Topher. Yeah, okay. Everybody already heard about the Topher match.
I think me and Sasuke actually started watching that same game, but because game 1 dragged on for so long with those pilfers, and then oh my god,
he pilfered a chump wump at the end of the game and put 2 shrooms in his deck. And 2 shrooms in his deck. There was 10 shrooms in a 14 card deck. He drew 3 shrooms off the top.
Yeah, that match was absolutely insane.
So Pilfer is definitely pretty strong, and I think in just looking at Winding God's deck, it doesn't really seem like he cares about. I think he just cares about getting the Maokai win condition, really, because he doesn't have a lot of big sea monsters. It is weird.
Yeah, I feel like Nautilus is a little bit more of a vulnerable strategy. If we do see a Nautilus come down and then instantly get removed, you've just kind of wasted an entire turn, and you're generally behind on board until the Nautilus does come down. So you need to kind of float a turn to get him out, and then you can pass and you can get into your crazy turns. But Winding God just already behind on board, and this is what I was talking about. Presto hits deep a lot earlier than he does, and now this Abyssal Eye is going to be able to trade onto both of the Abyssal Eyes out of Winding God. And yeah, Winding God's sitting at 9 out of 25 on his Maokai, while Presto's at 22. And I know that we talk a lot about how you generally want the Maokai to come down after the Nautilus so that your opponent can get the refuel. But I feel like I haven't seen a Sea Monster mirror yet where that was actually a viable option. I feel like constantly you are forced to kind of Maokai before the Nautilus comes out, just to kind of force the Nautilus out of your opponent so that you can have a free turn to kind of reign supreme. And we do see the Nautilus in the hand of Presto. Atrocity is lethal with this Nautilus. I haven't paid attention if it was tossed or not. Presto is down to 9 cards in deck, so that is a very real possibility.
Yeah, again, we don't know what's tossed, but I will say Atrocity, especially in the mirror match with Winding God not having it in his deck, that's a huge advantage that you got to really question some of the decisions that Winding God's made with his deep deck and why he made the decisions. But obviously, Winding God's won the last 3 tournaments, so we can't really hate on any decision he makes at this point.
So one thing that I did want to ask you about, it had seen very fringe playability in Sea Monsters in the past, but now we see a lot more players coming in on this Mist's Call.
Yes, so I was talking with Cass yesterday about that as well, and Miscall seems really good. I mean, especially in like aggro matchups, you can miscall on a Deadbloom Wanderer, which feels incredible. And I think Deadbloom is when I'm summoned, so you end up tossing 3 more as well. So it's really good in almost all matchups. If you're mirror match or more of a control matchup, you can do it on a Nautilus. Seems like a pretty good option. Or you can do just any of the big sea monsters, Abyssal Eyes, really anything is a good target for the miscall. It is kind of hard early with Dreg Dredgers and stuff. Obviously, you don't want to, get the smaller units, but I do think it's a really good addition to this deck.
Yeah, I know previously we'd really only seen Mist's Call coming out of like specifically Rekindler-based decks, things like Ash Harrowing and Karma Harrowing. That was really the only time we saw the Mist Calls. And those decks didn't run a lot of early game units, so it could be hard to find value in those and you could clunk up on them. But we saw Presto and Winding God both throwing these out onto some Jawl Hunters earlier, and I think that is one of the best targets for this card in the early game.
Yeah, Jawl Hunters is just a good card in general. Like, it's insane that something with 1 health that costs 3 is that great, but it's having that challenger on there just absolutely puts it over the top. That 4 damage for a challenger unit makes it incredible. So, yeah, I agree. That's another great target for it. And that just shows so many good targets for this deck. Even if you do get a Dreg Dredgers early on, that's just as another option for you to get deep that much faster if you do happen to land a Dreg Dredger. So it's really not the end of the world if you do hit that.
I also just noticed that Winding God is main decking the Beast Below that wasn't like randomly created off of Jaw Hunters, and that's something that we really don't see out of a lot of Sea Monster
Oh.
decks going for the much higher curve. So Winding God playing a little bit closer to the ground, and while it has played out for him well in this tournament, I don't think it plays out for him so well in the mirror in general.
Yeah, so what that tells me is maybe he wasn't expecting as many mirror matches as we ended up getting, but I feel like that's not the case though, because we've obviously seen Sea Monsters continue to grow in popularity. And if I mean, what is good in the mirror match, right? I mean, Atrocity is pretty good in the mirror match. Is there any specific card that you want to be teching in the mirror match?
I feel like Shipwreck Hoarders is probably the best one because it
Mhm.
does get up to 8 toughness. It gets over things like the Beast Below and the Devourer of the Depths. It pushes a lot of damage onto Nautilus. I think Vengeance and Shipwreck Hoarder are probably the two main cards of the mirror because if you can hit, like, these treasures are extremely impactful in the mirror. Keel Breaker's probably the weakest one. Treasure Trove's pretty hit or miss, but Plate Worm Egg cannot be understated. That is one of the best spells in the game, creating 3/8/8 fearsomes for 5 mana is an insane tempo swing, especially because Devour is sort of the staple and it does just miss the threshold on actually being able to take out those cards. And then, of course, Vengeance, just the most effective removal for Nautilus that you can imagine.
Yeah, so I mean, what you're saying is kind of goes alongside my thought process, right? That he just wasn't expecting as many mirror matches, maybe because it doesn't seem like he doesn't have Vengeance, he doesn't have Shipwreck Hoarder. He is playing the Beast Below, which again is obviously a much lower statted option than some other things. But we can see here, as we're talking, Winding God has full control over this field. We do have the Maokai coming out by Presto, but Winding God already has the Nautilus down. He has the Beast from below. I mean, we are going to see a Nautilus come down probably this turn from Presto, so I don't know how long those will last. But he is currently in control of the game, it seems like.
Yeah, and now Presto going to get that full refuel on his deck. It was a little unfortunate that the Atrocity was actually the last card thrown away by that last Thorny Toad. It was the last non-champion in his deck. So a little unlucky that, because if Presto had drawn that here and had blocked with the Spider instead of the Thorny Toad, he would actually have lethal.
Yeah, and we see it looks like they're both in a situation where they have Riptide. So they're just he's you know what? Screw it. I'm just gonna do it. We're gonna get it out there.
Yeah. And this is insanely good for Presto because now his Nautilus just gets stunned, so his is going to stick around. The proactivity from Winding God playing against him, and we do see this sapling from the Maokai trading very great onto this Devourer of the Depths, and now it feels like Presto has the board.
Yeah, and I think this kind of played out how we were alluding to in the beginning, right? Like, Winding God has the Beast from Belows and stuff to kind of get on board a little bit faster with the bigger units. But 7/7s pale in comparison to, you have the Beast from Below, or not Beast from Below, Terror of the Tides in Presto's hand right now. You're going to have some Shipwreck Hoarders coming out. He just drew another Nautilus. So he has bigger overall Sea Monsters in his deck, which are just going to overshadow most of what he drew it next to, most of what Winding God's going to throw down.
Yeah, and funny enough, I think Presto is actually totally fine blocking his Nautilus onto Winding God's Nautilus because he's making the sapling every turn, and both the Nautiluses will go to 1 HP. There's nothing that Winding God has that'll deal 2 damage to a Nautilus, but this Maokai sapling can block it out unless we do see it die here to this this Devourer of the Depths, which is entirely possible. At 7 life, Presto can't afford to take any attack, but there are a couple Maokais left in his deck. Unfortunately, doesn't get the sapling on draw, so yeah, Presto actually really on the back foot now, just not finding the Sea Monsters anymore, getting that second Nautilus off the top, not really doing him any favors.
No, it's really not, and it's swinging back in Winding God's favor. I was just gonna say it kind of depends on this top deck too, so that is a great option right now. I don't know, is there any way that Winding God counters this? I don't think
I would
so.
have to be another Nautilus's Riptide, but because he did get Maokai, he'd have to have one in hand.
Yep. And it does, I mean, his whole board trades, I mean, everything just trades evenly at this point. Everything being at 1 health doesn't particularly matter. Actually, never mind. I take that back. There is 3 Vile Feast that he has to worry about in Winding God's deck, but I'm not sure if he, if he threw him away, tossed him away or not.
Yeah, I was going to say, actually, attacking with the Terror of the Tides reduces the attack of everything on Winding God's board, so Presto's Devourer of the Depths will be able to either get through or trade valuably onto one of these.
So he will have 1 up on Winding God here in this interaction.
And I'm a little curious to see if he's going to hang on to this 1 health Nautilus to keep the Riptide in hand, or if he does just want to push it for the trade and then play another one.
I think this is smart because then I think if he keeps the Nautilus, it's smart. Or wow, he's not attacking at all. That surprises me.
I guess he just understands that the damage pushed through by the Devourer isn't that impactful. It would kind of even out the life total at 6 to 7, but looks like Presto's playing more for the board, and the second Devourer of the Depths is going to make that just play out beautifully for him.
Yeah, this will... I mean, it does turn out to be a little bit better thanks to the Devourer, but I'm still a little bit concerned because his Nautilus is much bigger. Presto almost cannot... He can't block with this Nautilus, which means he's losing his entire board. Because if he blocks with the Nautilus, the other Nautilus lives, and it feels like such a bad trade right now.
I wonder if he's going to go for... So if you just Nautilus's Riptide, Winding God's Nautilus, and then open attack, you just win, right?
Nautilus, Riptide... You're saying on the side of Winding God?
No, I want Presto to Riptide Winding God's Nautilus, get the trade on the 2 sea monsters, and then Winding God doesn't have a board left.
Oh, whoa, yeah. Yeah, so it looks like he is agreeing with you.
The proactivity is a little bit scary. We did see Winding God get punished for this earlier, but it's actually going to work out for Presto.
Well, yeah, because would that be the last Nautilus? Is that the last Nautilus on the side of Winding God?
I think he has 2 since he did play a Nautilus's Riptide, and he had the Nautilus on board, so he should have 2 in deck, but he'd have to like top deck one and then top deck the other, and it's pretty unlikely to work out that way.
Yeah, I don't think... I mean, he could Vile Feast. He could Vile Feast to live, but nope, doesn't look like he has it. Wow, and Presto takes it. He is a happy guy in stream right now. Very, very happy with that win. Excited to see Presto. He's like, guys, I beat the guy who keeps winning every tournament. What is this? This is, that was... Two decently quick wins too. So, all right, that is it. So we're gonna have some more gameplay from Duels of Runeterra number 10 coming down the pipe this week. So if you guys are looking for that, definitely swing back around to the channel. If you're new to the channel, obviously hit that subscribe button so you can get those notifications when those videos do go live. So as always, everybody stay healthy, stay positive. I hope shit just works for you, and peace out.